I wanted to talk about unmasking for a while now and how it is actually a privilege to be able to do so. But there is so much more to it than to just stop being inauthentic. It goes way deeper than that because we forget why people resort to masking in the first place. So I was diagnosed autistic and ADHD at 28. And by that time, my mask and being forced to wear it constantly had completely broken me. I had been doing it since I can remember pretty much, long before I understood anything about my situation, right? Why I was so dysregulated and why certain environments, or almost all environments, felt physically unbearable to me. And originally, it came from generally feeling unsafe in this world. My authentic self would constantly be disapproved by everything and everyone around me almost all the time. And at the same time, there seemed to be no space at all for any of my emotions that were not quiet and slightly enthusiastic acceptance. In general, I always seem to be the only one struggling with overwhelming emotions. I just always felt everything so deeply and intensely with no way to cope with any of it or even speak up about it. And while my parents and society expected me to, sit down in a classroom 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, quietly and focused on the person in front of me monologuing, I just couldn't do that. And I was daydreaming and trying to process mountains of data, like being chained to a school desk suddenly for the rest of my childhood, trying to live up to an impossible productivity standard. I feel like there was just no way to express like 99% of my actual inner world. Like I felt like everyone was always just trying to distract me from my inner world or from myself, if that makes any sense. And I didn't feel like I was in the right place at all wherever I was. Like the world just felt wrong and weird and unsafe to me. I had no idea what was going on. Like I could never quite figure it out what to do, if that makes sense. Not just socially, I feel like it took so much of my energy to just process being alive and being kind of trapped in a process I didn't understand or wanted to be part of in any way. And so I always stood out negatively to others. But I wasn't treated as someone who needs additional support. And as I kept trying to grow into myself, I got metaphorically burned every time I tried to show up authentically. To me, it felt like no matter what I did or said, people wanted to misinterpret me or read into me or seemingly always find something that I didn't do correctly or to their liking. And I got bullied by other kids, of course. But what stayed longer than that even was how often the adults around me treated my distress as a character flaw, family included, right? They would dismiss me, gaslight me, and generally treat me like shit, right? I don't know how else to say it. It's bullies at home, bullies at school. They would not spare a chance to tell me how much of a failure I was to them. So eventually, I just hid everything from everyone around me because no one was safe to show myself vulnerable, basically. Everything that was not curated in some way to make it hopefully not trigger a reaction out of someone that would then trigger my trauma. So I stopped having opinions. I learned how to appear stable enough to keep a job, agreeable enough to keep relationships. I basically tried to become normal SpongeBob and just not draw attention to me and to my real self that I kind of tried to protect at all costs from the world, even though it was destroying me, but I didn't see another choice. And by my mid-20s, my body stopped cooperating, basically. I just couldn't recover anymore. And I had basically spent all my life up until this point under constant anxiety. I had built up such a huge amount of fatigue and distress that the smallest things would overwhelm me. And like tasks that, would used to cost me a ton of energy now just felt impossible outright. Full-time work became something I physically couldn't sustain. And looking back, I don't think I ever really had a chance of sustaining a normal life, which is what I was trying to build up to all along. I tried my hardest to, understand what was wrong with me. I just hadn't connected the dots yet. And so eventually I burned out. I could not go on anymore. And my mask, finally slipped. I couldn't wear it anymore. And I literally, back then I broke down in front of everyone at that workplace. I quit then and there and spent the next 5 hours sitting in the parking lot in my car with the realization that I can't do this anymore. And so I made a plan and I made a decision there, and I quit my entire life, basically. My job, I lost my relationship with my partner at the time, my relationship with my family, although looking back that was long overdue anyway, all within a span of a few months. I moved into a one-room apartment by myself. I sold everything I didn't absolutely need to basically just declutter my life as much as possible, and just make as much room as I could to just rest and to just crash. And then I spent the next 2 years only working part-time and nothing else. I would literally come home from work and spend all the time until my next shift, whenever that was, just laying in bed. And like for the first year, even working 20 hours a week felt like an impossible task. It took me so long to get to a point where now it's like working a part-time job feels, in terms of like how much it takes from you, it feels like a full-time job, right? I just had to deal with and process so much suppressed trauma, and like my nervous system hadn't been out of fight or flight in I don't know how long, if ever. And just that took all of my attention, just regulating, all of these years and decades of suppressed emotions and self-abandonment, and, opening up all of that stuff. It sucked. It really sucked, to say the least. But that was not the point where I stopped masking. But it was the point where I finally gathered the courage to seek a proper diagnosis. And with, with my newfound time and my ability to fall into all kinds of rabbit holes, I did all the research I could and started that process. But it took about a year in total. And at the end, I had my diagnosis. And although it was very healing to finally be validated and have at least an explanation for what happened and why it happened to me the way it happened, but also you basically get confronted with the reality that you're in fact disabled. And the process of accepting yourself as disabled, when you have been advocating for yourself for decades without being heard, you basically kind of always knew, and everybody treated and measured you against fully able people. And to change your entire mindset of how you engage with the world and yourself like that is an insane amount of work. And I can't imagine how many people out there went through a similar process, and how many of us have coexisted all along, just isolated from each other's experiences. And I want you to know that you are not alone and you didn't deserve to carry this burden. And that brings us to the present time, where I still can exist in this society without being in distress. And that's not a pessimistic belief, that's just my experience. It's my living environment that's cause for the stress, and I can only control a limited amount of it. I still need to sleep more than the average person. I still cannot be productive and active at a normal level. I don't have the cognitive and physical energy or capacity for that. I cannot keep a full-time job, and I'm basically always recovering from almost constant exhaustion that's just been sitting in my bones for decades. But I may have permanently damaged my resilience and capacity by masking my physical and mental struggle for so long and let it do so much damage to me. Whenever my body is not in a safe environment, it is in distress. And I will need to mask that distress still if I want to keep a stable life. Masking is still a survival strategy that I need to use, and constantly pushing through that exhaustion and overstimulation for seemingly simple things. Just because, what's the other choice? You know what I mean? Like, I have no choice than to, overriding my struggle, because there's just all of these things that constantly need my attention and my care. And at first, unmasking, no longer pretending, showing how you really feel or how you really are, sounds like a liberation. But it's only possible for those who can afford it. Everyone else risks their safety, because our society demands authenticity and presents it as the key to a happy life. But those who are truly authentic are rejected, fired, or isolated in some way, because authenticity is only accepted as long as it works within the established system. And for neurodivergent people, that's basically a lose-lose situation, because you either get sick from masking or you suffer the consequences of authentically reacting to the systems around you and exposing how little they actually accommodate us, if at all. So unmasking effectively increases the risk for crisis for a group of people who are already more likely to face, all kinds of insecurities, whether it be social, professional, financially, and without a safety net, and that safety net is the privilege. Without that, unmasking is your ruin, especially if you're forced to unmask because of burnout, like it happened for me. I'm not trying to say don't accommodate yourself. I don't want to say don't be yourself whenever you can. I want to tell you that you are not lacking courage. Unmasking is not a developmental step that everyone can readily take in the same way. If unmasking feels threatening to you, that's not because of you, but because of a lack of safety. And unmasking is not a realistic goal, at least for the time being, if it means losing your job or your safety. We just don't have any support in the system currently. And I'm still figuring things out for myself too. And that's also why I am here, to find people who experience life the same way that I do. So if you can relate in any way to this, I hope I could help you process a bit of that pain. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time, I guess.